The Diary of Thoughts, Part 9, Doubts and Fears, about Religion. Written by c.Pacheco. I mentioned before that I defend the notion that life is nothing but logic and energy, along with feelings being this last element, the one that neutralizes the conflict between the first two ones. But in the middle of those two essential elements, lots of other components are directly or indirectly generated by that magnificent process of creation. A logic is also implicated in logic itself. Maybe that logic thought about creating illogic in the first place. This question means that perhaps we are all looking and guiding ourselves by a wrong logic. After all, we are all living on the basis of several perhaps, as they are a constant in life. We always say, perhaps this or perhaps that. Perhaps is nothing but doubts about things and events, sometimes even about ourselves as a person. These perhaps and these doubts create between them the maybe. We say, maybe this or maybe that. Perhaps that person loves you or hates you. Perhaps that person is honest or not. Perhaps tomorrow it will be shining, but perhaps will be raining the whole day. Perhaps is connected with everything in life, even with feelings. I wrote something using that word to talk about love and at the same time to talk about creation herself. Hank the Voice Beukema reads from the Diary of Thoughts poems, written by c.Pacheco.
Perhaps we have met before, in another place, in another time, in a different dimension. Perhaps that a part of me lives inside of you, and our two energies makes a single star in a distant galaxy that we just can't see. Perhaps that we just casually met in life's crossroad. Perhaps life herself is a single universal day that ends at sunset. Perhaps we are living in a dream of fears, but still making part of each other, sharing the same thoughts, the same doubts, the same illusions. Or we're only two little drops of God's tears. Perhaps we should join our two souls forever before we are caught by the final stream. Perhaps we are wasting the life of just one single particle that was meant to be together. Perhaps I am you and you are me. We'll wait and see. Perhaps.
People are so afraid of what they cannot understand. That fear leads us to controversial behaviors that must be analyzed and considered during our relationship with others, family or friends. We can say that we reach inner peace when there are no more doubts and fears concerning most of the contexts of our lives. This is only possible when we finally reach that level of understanding and intelligence that we'll never achieve in this dimension we are living. Sometimes we are afraid because we think that we're different from other people around us, and also because we are, in a particular measure, convinced that others don't have the same problems that we do. In fact, we're not as different as that, in our reactions, emotions, and feelings and thoughts. We have the tendency to create our world, and we forget that other people's worlds have identical or even worse problems to solve and questions to be answered. All of us are caught in this dimension where we are living without our consent. Nobody posed us any question if we wanted to be here or not. I believe that the first human being on Earth was afraid, even terrorized by that fact. Since this part of the document is related to religion, I often used to say, we'll never be able to clean all our sins on a single Sunday. It would take an eternity to do it. We're just humans, maybe paying for something we didn't do in the first place. But perhaps that creation did that on purpose, and it might cause us an inner doubt to reach a certain level of spiritual evolution. Perhaps that creation gave us the individual challenge to achieve faith in the first place, to allow us to reach both belief and convictions. At this point, we can begin talking about values that are mixed with religion, but in fact, they are very different from that issue or subject. I can tell you that I never read any Bible, but I am sure that every single thought I have about creation is mentioned within each existing Bible on earth. There is an essential role played by all Bibles in the world, which is to put in writing all the good principles, all the good values that should be practiced in the first place. It's a kind of spiritual guide that is essential to every one of us. Without that spiritual guide, society wouldn't have surmounted difficult situations and existential conflicts throughout history. The several ways of writing according to the multiple existing religions lead to the same conclusions, mostly spiritual values to acquire the necessary resistance to face our daily lives. I assume that by reading the Bible, we're almost apt to understand all adversities and obstacles that life presents us as people learn to understand and finally accept all those challenges that make part of our existence. I was raised in the middle of atheist members in my family who influenced me a lot about the way I think today, in spite that there is no identification between my thoughts and beliefs about this subject and theirs. In the end, by examining their behaviors all along their lives, I noticed that they were not completely atheist. Let's be aware of the fact that being an atheist doesn't mean that we believe in nothing. Nobody believes the empty. Inside us, some perceptions and sensations are directly captured from life, from creation. As a result of that education, I never went to assist or participate in a mass in a church, neither paid the usual and sometimes necessary reverence towards any priest. By the contrary, I always posed the question why I had to kiss the hands of someone I don't know, mostly because not even my father or mother asked me to do so. My grandfather always taught me to face life with courage and toughness and consider death as a natural fact, mostly as an end of everything. This notion is extended not only to atheists but also to some religions that claim to be the people of God, forgetting that all of us are people of the creation, as creation is the only universal God. The role of the church was and still is a fundamental foundation to achieve the convergence of spiritual states of mind. In all of us, there is that necessity to share our thoughts and beliefs with other people around us. That communion gives the feeling that we are not alone in society, that other people are sharing the same spiritual ideals. We cannot count the number of acts of generosity and even love that some sectors of the church exercised for centuries. But mostly, those actions were performed by the soldiers that were on that battlefield, in this case, a religious one. Like the army, these priests were at the front to bring and build spiritual and material comfort to society, mostly to the poor. And it was also due to their benevolent attitudes that their leaders were forced to share their fortune. Otherwise, they would become richer and fatter than they are today. During the road of my life, I assisted to several changes in religious terms. Members of my family gave me examples of how people can be induced and brainwashed, becoming fanatics of certain religion, standing for it by all means, even to the point of discriminating toward members of their family. A movie that expresses the positive and negative influence of the church and its conqueror of souls, showing all the intrigues and fight for power within itself and to consolidate their corrupted goals, was the one with Robert De Niro and Jeremy Irons, namely, The Mission. I always felt as if in a football team against another, or even worse, like gang against gang, all in name of God due to religion. Discrimination is practiced, forgetting what is written in the several Bibles. Prosecution was practiced as political ideologies against different ideologies. We see what happened in history as some religions committed declared murders, even genocide in the name of God. Also in history, we see all wars that were generated worldwide in the name of a particular religious cause or spiritual orientation. Another example of the inner corruption that led church to persecute and massacre part of the society is Umberto Eco's adaptation of his literary masterpiece The Name of the Rose, and put to film with Sir Sean Connery in the main role. This work is an extraordinary movie about truth and lies, intrigues and betrayals within the church. Nowadays we can assist to the degradation of the moral values as situations concerning pedophile priests who practiced that kind of molestation and child abuse, perhaps also in the name of God, according to their point of view. There are many more scandals that we don't even know. Sometimes it's better not to know. Also, the church always detained an autonomous status as a financial state, even political and economical, since the Vatican as an independent country and state represents one of the biggest fortunes in the world, if not the greatest. All that power was consolidated by the participation of their followers that were almost starving in the first place. We watched the events of the 11th September, where it is explicitly declared the extreme fanaticism that can be reached by individual elements of the society. People sacrifice their lives in bomb attempts, killing their people, women and children, senior citizens and so on, all this in the name of God. The spirit of a holy war is still alive as during the Middle Age, and political and economical interests are at the base of all that hypocrisy. Meanwhile, The governments of some of those countries, along with the religious leaders, live in a declared world of ostentation and luxury while their people are starving. This practice is a cult of suffering and poorness in the name of God. As we assist every single day to these sad examples given by political and religious leaders, society arrives at the point of stop believing in their ideals and values that made part of several generations of their families. More and more people become atheists in a certain sense, and nobody can blame them for that. Aside all the ideals and values translated by no matter what religion, there will always be the human factor related to greed and power that contaminates the human soul of the heads of any church. While living alone in a foreign country in my 40s, I faced some extreme moments of introspection under isolation. As I had been nominated and charged with a professional mission, I had to create several structures necessary to the practice of that business. One of them was this huge office that was supposed to be ready for some 30 people but finally was just for me as the company changed plans. I always told to my family and friends that if one day I would have to choose a religion to practice and devote myself, it would be the one that fits my spirit and soul the most, through my belief, my faith. In this case, I truly think that it would be Buddhism, as it gives me the necessary spiritual inspiration and tranquility to keep on going and accepting all events in life. As strange as it might seem, that huge house that I referred before had been the headquarters of the House of the Baha'i, a Buddhist association. This coincidence also makes me think that, by the fact I was submitted to all that loneliness and isolation, I was in a certain way capturing the essence of the souls that were still living in that peaceful place. As I faced all those moments of loneliness and isolation, my inner need to find existential answers developed in an incredible and unpredictable way. For a person that never put his feet in a church, I found myself in a cathedral and elected my favorite place to escape from that loneliness and isolation and try to find some spiritual comfort. Let's be clear that for me, the fact of being in a Catholic church didn't mean anything to me regarding a religious tendency. It could have also been a Protestant one. The important thing for me was to find a place where I could find peace of mind, feel the presence of a higher entity, and also doing my best to get a connection or contact with it. One single day, while completely exhausted by having to face several difficult situations that life brought me, I addressed myself to that precise place that I elected and tried to find a moment of peace. Finally, I dove in that dimension that I cannot explain, and suddenly time had just passed in a way that I will never be able to understand. The sensation of inner peace was so wonderfully comfortable, and the feeling of happiness was clearly present. It was the second time that it happened in my life. While still in my 20s, I had a heart condition that led me to be very close to death. I cannot forget that night, as I just started sweating while all my forces were disappearing. I sweated just by the fact of spending a small necessary energy to speak. Weeks later, I left my house for the first time, and suddenly I was invaded by that same sensation of inner peace, tranquility and happiness. I don't know how long it lasted, maybe a few seconds, but that seemed an eternity. I felt that it was the first contact that I had accomplished with the creation. This inner feeling caused by that magnificent and divine experience went along with me the rest of my days. Once, during Christmas, I wrote a small story to my daughter that is also written later in this book, trying to give her certain notions about what I feel concerning beliefs and convictions about the absent. This small story for children that I wrote can also be adapted to adults, as there is no age to start believing. I truly think that beliefs cannot be learned, as there is always a certain point in our lives that those beliefs and convictions are present. They'll stay or not inside of us, depending on our state of mind or spiritual state. That spiritual state has to happen naturally, as it also happens with love and feelings. Nobody can teach us to love, because there are no rules to love better or worse. If there is love, it's in our hearts, and it will also be manifested depending on its degree. Every one of us has our religion. We all have our personal Jesus. It's up to us to touch faith. Once again, it's up to us to identify our enemy, our hearts, our souls. Ultimately, it's all about the absent, not about what our eyes can reach, but mostly in what our hearts can feel. It's all about our origin. During several occasions, I tried to give this message to my mother, as she belonged to a particular religion and had a certain activity related to this situation. Lots and lots of hours we spent around very constructive conversations, one after another. As you can see by my words, there were lots of divergences in spiritual terms between the two of us, but they were constructive. For me, the most important thing was to try to explain to her what I felt, putting aside religious differences and all the conflicts that are at the origin of those same religions. But for her, that individual and spiritual road made her comfort zone. As for me, this is all about our origin. I wrote and dedicated a poem for her to express all my beliefs along with the love I have for her, as she, herself, is my origin. Here is Hank Beukema, master of the spoken word, reading from the Diary of Thoughts poems.
Origin. You are my origin, like the birth of a virgin forest. Holy, pure, immaculate. You are my spirit, my courage, my energy, my joy of living. You are my roots, the strength I always wanted to find in my life. You are the natural source of the vital energy that rotates the world, symbol of humility, product of the complicity between you and the Creator, regardless of your inner pain. What makes you a different being is your love for the invisible, the absent, never failing to be present in this apparent dimension. Because I am your continuity, the transmission of your mission in this world, I will live forever thinking about you, no matter the distance or the urge to want to relive all the moments we left behind us. Even if life will not allow, I'll never stop loving you. Feel what really lives inside of you. I will never forget the moments spent by your side. And even if you see me old, worn, and tired, I'll always be there, ready to die for you. In my heart lives the belief that as great as it is the sadness for this distance, we'll always be together, and other times will come, maybe in another dimension, that will make us love, remember, relive what we have begun and what we have to accomplish. Together, the two of us will dive into a different world, far away from all this that surrounds us, this nightmare, this odyssey that has been our two lives, but still one single existence, and live forever, side by side, with the difference that it will not be a dream, an illusion, but instead, the return to our origin.
Human beings live in a confrontation with their existence since they'll never understand why they were condemned to die since the first moment of their lives. Maybe this is the fact that is at the origin of all the excesses that are practiced by society, namely the attempts against our rights and dignity, for the ones that still believe in that, or know its meaning as vital definitions in every dictionary. In a logical way, we should always have an obligation to understand each other, as we have the same sentence pending on our heads, but quite the contrary, people massacred and abused people throughout history. The difference between human beings and animals is consciousness, even though we are not sure if they don't have it, but this one should bring us the necessary responsibility to behave and act in a different way. After all, with all our science and technology, with all our acclaimed intelligence, evolution, internet, phones, satellites, virtual realities and all that is related to it, we just survive exactly like any animal species existing on Earth. The big difference between human beings and animals resides on the fact that the first ones have a particular consciousness about it, or were supposed to have it. Still, we are not sure if animals have any consciousness and feelings at all. I think they do. The respect towards animals that is manifested by some people already translates that kind of awareness that exists inside some of us, human beings. After all, it's called respect for life, respect for feelings. At this point, you can tell me that this thought is depressing, but I will tell you that the way we are living is more depressing than to try to find the necessary answers to stop this state of mind that dominates a significant part of society. Of course, it's much easier not to think. But the problem is when we wake up in the morning after dreaming about certain realities that we tried to hide while awake. So, why not get a little bit depressed in the sense of trying to find solutions for our depression, in a logical way? Isn't there a contradiction between the rules that God created and the final purpose of life? Maybe it represents the difference between the definitions about God and creation. In reality, according to different cultures, there are different gods, But there is only one creation called life that is present everywhere. If we name creation as God, let's all admit that there is a crucial mistake about the notion that everything wrong that happens in society is the result of human beings and all that is good and wonderful is the result of God. That would be the easiest way to ignore God's own mistakes and failures, since supposedly we are all made in His image. If our intelligence and inspiration was brought to us by God Himself, then we should think that He should have given us the capacity to avoid stupidity and hypocrisy as a form to hide our fears and doubts, to avoid malice and jealousy on behalf of love and friendship. This conclusion only means that not even God is perfect if we want to give this name to creation, and it's not by the fact we venerate Him that we'll have more knowledge, or get some final rewards, like going to heaven. In reality, let's all assume that, if we venerate God, it's because we are afraid of Him, mostly afraid of what we don't know, about what is the invisible balance, that controls everything and everybody. Let's not forget that most people who behave in religious terms, are not doing it voluntarily or spontaneously, but they are trying to conquer a place in heaven instead, which is a virtual place that religion created to attain power and spiritual supremacy in the first place. We are afraid of that invisible entity that is presented to our eyes as capable of doing everything, without faults or mistakes. That's the only reason why we venerate that image instead of understanding its meaning, its purpose as our existential mother. We are afraid of that invisible entity that stays behind the scenes and capable of determining what was, what is, and what will be. Maybe that the final selection that people talk about and fight for, if there is one, will be based on the individual challenge and the courage to comprehend, to analyze, even judge the imperfections of Mother Nature, Mother Creation, our universal mother after all. That will be the only way to correct and improve the imperfections of creation herself, and maybe that even she is expecting that from us. To be able to analyze all good and bad, positive and negative, logic and illogic, right and wrong, we have to listen and watch all the different concepts and perspectives about every single subject in life, even about religion and faith. There is a flagrant confrontation between all principles and practices exercised either by science or by religion. In fact, neither of them is correct in their points of view, since science claims that they know the origin of life, but this knowledge is simply based on evidence of facts, and these are constantly changing. In fact, science is based on evidence that is understood in the present, with some recoiled elements of the past, but not forcibly reflected on the future. Additionally, religion and faith claim that some knowledge was given to its representatives because God whispered them. The manipulation of society under that basis leads to economic interests causing wars everywhere in the name of God, forgetting that faith is something that cannot be learned as it is to be lived and come out spontaneously in each one of us. In fact, faith is nothing but the individual perception about the laws of nature and the respect we have to develop to be in harmony with life. If we don't respect those laws, we'll never be able to respect ourselves and other people around. Those who cannot interpret those natural laws are the ones that cause misery and pain to the rest of society. Unfortunately, society is dependent and manipulated either by religion or by science, and this fact brings us to the conclusion that neither of them is right or correct in their actions. I believe that my opinion is a neutral one when I examine both roles and practices and try to find a middle term of attitude and behavior in both issues. Science should not be so linear regarding its pretension of having all the answers, as those are constantly changing according to new conclusions, even new scientific philosophies, as these last ones exist. The fact is that everything in life implies a philosophy. Religion is a necessity, but it lost its purpose, as during centuries in a row induced society to practices of war, causing misery and pain everywhere, contradicting all the fundamental values and principles written in the different existing Bibles. To all this, we have to consider the economical interests that are connected to this practice, always in the name of God. In this conformity, I propose that you'll watch and analyze in a neutral way the British documentaries by the scientist Dr. Richard Dawkins, namely, The God Delusion and the Virus of Faith, that presents some facts and poses some questions about God and everything that He represents to society in general. I had this sad experience with a member of my family that confirmed my opinion about religion and everything that is implicated in a negative way to that word. As a matter of fact, I experienced within my family different religious practices and different religious beliefs that finally lead to the same conclusion, the same spiritual goals, without the people involved got the exact notion about this fact. At a certain point of this conversation with this member of my family, she started to tell me about the differences between the pure and original sources of her religion, compared to other accidental and worldwide religions. She claimed that her God was the only one, and her Bible was written by her only and unique God. All the other claimed gods and Bibles were fakes because they were part of Satan's will to cause division and dispersion of spirits. At that moment I had to tell her that if it is written in every Bible that there is only one God, and we are all the same, and we are all made in the image of God Himself, why should people commit the contradiction and sin to betray His sacred will? Why do they claim that their religion and their Bible are the only original ones, despising the belief and convictions of their similar brothers and sisters? If it is written in all Bibles that we have to love each other, why do we create religious misery and pain to each other, ignoring that this is a sort of discrimination that contradicts every sacred principle mentioned in every Bible? This led me once again to the conclusion that one of the worst poorness and diseases that the creation made in the world is pure ignorance. Due to that ignorance, along with elements like power and greed, society created their Satan, using this fundamental doubt to cause religious genocides in history, to cause wars, to manipulate, even burn people in the name of God, their God. If those people believe in Satan, then they should know that fanaticism makes part of the policy of Satan. Maybe it stars in religion. It's sad to notice how far away those people are from God while claiming that they venerate Him and respect Him. It's sad to notice how dishonest some people are while preaching something that they cannot practice, judging and blaming people all around for their faults and mistakes, as they know they are the real sinners in the first place. If we think that creation is a supreme and divine entity that rules the entire universe, and we all make part of that creation, then just integrate with that energy, logic and love that is implied on everything that was created, as we make an intrinsic part of it. Maybe life is nothing but the final result of a supreme and unique entity that rules everything in the universe. Everything is based on energy, logic and feelings. These three components can create a new world without prejudices, differences, self-concepts that only lead us to disrespect ourselves and the Creator Himself. Maybe we create our evil, our demons, our Satan as we disrespect one single and fundamental principle, which is that the Creator made us all equal and in His image. Maybe the real sin is to pretend we have all the answers, while simply ignoring the existence of others around us that are the same as we are. Maybe the main goal of creation is that humanity reaches a point of spiritual evolution that will lead us to a stage of intelligence that will bring us the necessary knowledge to find that religion has nothing to do with faith or convictions. Maybe that will lead us to a higher level of existence in a common platform, based on comprehension and respect about our origins. If you read all these words and absorb its content and mostly the way I express at the end of this chapter, you'll verify that there is always a maybe that is mentioned. This word translates the presence of a common element that can make us believe or not, in spite there will always be a maybe to be questioned. Maybe the Creator did that on purpose to cause us an inner challenge beginning at an individual debate about belief and faith, about our origins, about creation herself. Maybe the final selection of the elected people who will join the Creator, and by doing so, join eternity, will be the ones that dare to put questions in a neutral way about everything that they don't understand, but finally, maybe they want to improve and ameliorate. By doing so, maybe we are helping the Creator at the same time, as we make part of Him. Maybe.
Maybe I try to understand everything, still understanding nothing. Maybe I try to see what I wasn't allowed to look with my own eyes. Maybe I try to absorb the values, the principles, the energy, the logic that are out there, somewhere, yet invisible. Maybe that my world doesn't match this dimension, in spite that God chose that way. Maybe I'm looking for the impossible, the unreachable, another galaxy, another dimension without extension. Maybe I believed at what I shouldn't, still hoping that things and people would change. Maybe my feelings are just a dream, like a picture on a screen, that you believe it might be true. Maybe one day I'll find you, you'll find me, and you will be able to tell me, to see in my own eyes who I am, and finally comprehend what I love and what I cannot stand. I just wanted to understand. Carlos Pacheco, Luxembourg, the 12th October 2011.
The other day I was talking with my mother on the phone, and I was telling her about my constant pain by the fact that my beloved wife passed away almost 1 year ago. At that moment, she was telling me about her experience when my father also had to leave us. I told my mother on the phone that feelings are like faith, as each one of us has to feel it in our own way, without comparing the different degrees of faith and feelings. Those are natural elements brought to our souls by the Creator that arrives or not at one certain moment of our lives. Some of us feel it, others don't, and others simply ignore them, though they are there, very real, very present in our spirits. To finish with this part of the book, I must tell you that, as life is full of contradictions that finally lead to conclusions, I found myself thinking, I'm a very religious person after all, but in my way. May God bless you all. The Diary of Thoughts, end of Part 9, written by Carlos Pacheco.